I recently read a powerful article by the noted American author and academic Arthur Brooks, which was called Why Are Young People Everywhere So Unhappy? And I've been thinking about it ever since. Brooks draws from large scale research on happiness and shows that young people, especially in wealthier and more industrialized countries, are more unhappy today than ever before. He talks about how the typical happiness curve across life, which is the U shaped curve that once showed young people as happier in the earlier years, is now starting from a much lower level. In other words, it's not that people become unhappy with age, it's that today's young are already deeply disconnected right from the start. And as I was reading this, a thought kept returning to me. This is no longer just an American story. This is India's story too. From a long time, we Indians saw the struggles of the West as distant problems. Things like mental health issues or loneliness epidemics or spiritual voids. We assumed, perhaps naively, that our strong family connections and structures, our cultural values, and our spiritual traditions would protect us. But over the decade, I've seen the landscape shift massively. More young Indians are burnt out before 30. More teenagers are anxious, even when they seem to have everything working for them. And perhaps most heartbreakingly, there's a growing sense that life itself is losing meaning for them. Not because they don't have goals, of course they do, but because the goals they're chasing no longer feel real. It's tempting to blame social media or technology or Western influence. And yes, they're all contributing factors. But if you're honest, the roots go deeper. I think we need to ask a more uncomfortable question, which is what if the way we define success is itself broken? What if the very path we are all sprinting on is tilted towards unhappiness? This is where Charlie Munger's concept of inversion becomes incredibly useful. So, Charlie often said, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I will never go there. He believed that one of the most effective mental models in life is to figure out what not to do, to study failure closely and then deliberately avoid it. If we apply this to happiness, maybe the more useful question is not how can I be happy, but what typically makes people deeply unhappy and how do I avoid that? And when you invert like that, when you look at how young people end up unhappy, you start seeing some clear patterns, many of which Brooks touches on in his article. So, the first factor for the growing unhappiness among the youth is disconnection. There's no polite way to say this, but we are becoming emotionally malnourished. The average young person today is more connected than ever in terms of likes or shares and notifications, and yet somehow feels more alone than their grandparents ever did. We've replaced long conversations with short texts. We've traded shared silences with curated stories. We scroll through our friends' lives instead of sitting across from them. Brooks' research also shows that young people who still have close friendships and intimate relationships, they experience a traditional U-shaped curve of happiness. It's not technology alone that's the problem. It's what it has displaced. India's youth is especially vulnerable here. We moved from multi-generational homes to nuclear families in just one generation. From evenings filled with cricket and games and gossips to evenings where four people sit in four rooms with four screens. And all of this in the name of progress. Now, I'm not against modernity, but I wonder what's the sense of having a smart home if you feel emotionally homeless inside it? As per Brooks, the second factor for the growing unhappiness among the youth is the erosion of meaning. He cites compelling data that shows how the more affluent a country becomes, the less its people report feeling that their lives have meaning. At first glance, that seems counterintuitive. Shouldn't wealth give people the freedom to do what they love? Shouldn't it buy time and peace and purpose? But the opposite often happens. As external comforts rise, internal grounding weakens. Now, this doesn't mean we should romanticize poverty. It means that meaning is not a byproduct of wealth, it's something that must be cultivated deliberately. In India, this contradiction is becoming increasingly visible. Young people are entering high paying jobs, they're living in metro cities and ticking all the boxes of success. Yet, many feel like they are running on a treadmill. They're exhausted, but not really moving towards anything that deeply matters. The question they're struggling with quietly and painfully is, why am I doing all this? And often they don't know. I've been there myself. In my 20s, I followed the script: get a good education, land a corporate job, climb the ladder of success. But somewhere along the way, I realized I was chasing metrics and not meaning. It wasn't until I started asking different questions. Questions like, what feels true to me? What kind of life do I want to build? What's worth failing for? That things slowly began to shift. And the thing is that the answers were not grand or glamorous. They were simple things like family or writing, teaching, nature, stillness. None of them looked impressive on a LinkedIn bio, but all of them made my life feel more like my own. Anyways, the third factor for the growing unhappiness among the youth is the loss of inner life. Brooks talks about how the decline of religious or spiritual belief is closely tied to unhappiness, especially in richer countries. Now, India may be deeply religious on the surface, but I believe we are facing a spiritual crisis too. There's a difference between religion as ritual and spirituality as inner grounding. Many young people I see today are culturally religious, but existentially, they're adrift. They may visit temples, they fast on certain days or follow festivals, but when life hits them hard, they often lack the inner scaffolding to process pain or the silence to hear their own thoughts. We are taught all how to code, how to speak English fluently, how to clear competitive exams, but no one teaches us how to sit with ourselves. No one teaches us how to be okay when we feel lost. No one tells us that meaning is not found in a TED talk or a bio update, but in the quiet commitment to keep showing up for life, even when it doesn't make sense. And that brings me to something I think is worth sitting with. It's that feeling unhappy or uncertain does not mean there's something wrong with you. In fact, it might actually be the most natural response to the kind of world we are living in, one that moves too fast, one that demands too much and often makes too little sense. If you're tired or lost or wondering what it's all for, maybe it's not a personal flaw. Maybe it's just a sign that you are paying attention. This is where Charlie Munger's idea of inversion really helps. So instead of chasing happiness in the way we are told to, through more stuff, more success, and more visibility, maybe it's more useful to ask what usually makes people miserable and then quietly start stepping away from those things. Maybe it's the constant need to compare or the pressure to always be productive or spending too much time in spaces where you feel like you are not enough. These are things that quietly wear us out, and letting go of even a few of them can make space for something better to emerge. Now, that something better doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be as simple as having a real conversation with someone you care about, or taking a walk without your phone, or noticing that you actually feel a little more alive after spending time in nature, or journaling your thoughts without trying to make them sound smart. There's no fixed formula here. It's just about finding what feels honest and real for you. And none of this offers instant rewards. And maybe that's the point. A meaningful life often unfolds very slowly. It asks for your attention, not your perfection. And as Brooks says, real happiness is not about comfort alone. It's about connection, it's about inner depth, and knowing what truly matters to you beyond the noise. So, if there's one thing I've taken from all this, it's that happiness may not always look the way we expect. It might not come wrapped in ambition or applause, but it tends to show up quietly when we stop chasing and start living in a way that feels a little more aligned and a little more human. And maybe, just maybe, that's more than enough. Thank you so much for your time.